Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And today we're going to be speaking with Bonnie Lane from No Shame on You, which is a mental health organization. But before we dive into the interview and before I introduce Bonnie, I just want to give the listeners kind of a taste of my background on interactions with people who had or currently have mental illness. My grandmother, my mother's mother, at age 40, and keep in mind the terminology was different in those days than it is today. So I'm going off the terminology at the time. She had, and I'm making air quotes with my finger, a mental breakdown at age 40. And ultimately, it was discovered not only being legally blind, but she also suffered from schizophrenia. And a lot of people don't know what schizophrenia is. They think it's multiple personality disorder, which is what I thought when I was a kid. I had no idea. But schizophrenia is, and Bonnie, you can always correct me, inability to differentiate between the real world and a fantasy world. And I'll give you an example. She once told my mother, "Oh, I had a wonderful visit from my cousin. It was great. We talked about old times," or whatever she said. And my mom called the cousin and said, "Thank you for visiting my mom." And she says, "I never visited your mom." So she was living in this world where everything was great. And this people think, "Oh, mental illness, they're going to be violent." This woman wouldn't hurt a fly. As a matter of fact, my mom used to bring her fresh clothing all the time. And she was so kind and nice, or my mom would bring her candy. She would give it away to the staff. "Oh, you like this sweater? Please take it." Just such a kind-hearted person, but difficult to have a relationship with because, she knew I was her grandson. I was a little kid, but there wasn't a deep relationship. And that was ages 0 to 15 for me. When I turned 15, I joined a police explorer program where I learned how police deal with mentally ill. And thank God they deal with mentally ill differently today in a kindler, let's get you help manner rather than your violent slam the handcuffs on, which is great. Well, between the ages of 18 and 28, I actually set up security departments at multiple Chicagoland area hospitals, focusing on managing the behaviors of people in psychiatric wards as well as people in emergency rooms who may have a psychological emergency or be under the influence of illicit or non-illicit substances, which alters the mental state. I later joined two school districts where I set up the security departments following the Columbine shooting. And what was very interesting to me is one student in particular in high school started to manifest schizophrenia symptoms. And it turns out he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was a disruptive individual. Due to the mental illness, I don't know, but we were able to get him to walk across the graduation stage and graduate just like the other students, which was a wonderful thing. And then in my later years, I worked in law enforcement, and we arranged training specifically for autism spectrum disorders on how the police should interact with them. Now, there's a difference between a chronic diagnosis and a temporary diagnosis as well. We understand that. And today, there's not as much of a stigma with mental health as there has been in the past, particularly in industries where you got to be a big, tough person. So you're talking about the military, public safety, firefighting. These are humans too. And Bonnie Lane is here from an organization called No Shame on You. Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate you inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk.
Terrific. We met at a networking group. It could have been Jewish networking organization, possibly. I'm involved in several, so it's kind of hard to track people. But known you for several years. Can you tell everyone, what do you do?
So, No Shame on You is an organization that I sit on the board of, and it's an amazing nonprofit mental health support and education organization that serves the Jewish community and beyond. But I joined that because I am a psychologist, and I have been working with mentally ill families and individuals, families of mentally ill individuals, for the past 30 years. I spent the first 19 years of my career in community-based mental health, working with mentally ill folks and their families, and noticed there was a gap in services to assist families navigate the mental health world. And 14 years ago, I stepped into that world, and my company, Family Support Services, is exactly what it says. I support families who are responsible for individuals that struggle with serious mental illness or addiction or with addiction, and they may or may not be neurodivergent or on the spectrum. I find appropriate resources for families. I do hospitalizations or detox if that's necessary. I do residential placements across the country. I work with families across the country. I do step-down programs to partial hospitalization or intensive outpatient programs, which are day programs, either in the community where somebody is attending residential once they step down, or to bring them home to complete their recovery in a home-based mental health treatment facility. I also work with the legal system to assist people when they need to access benefits like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, SSI, SSDI, and I serve on a housing task force to help developers work with the government to get tax advantages to build subsidized housing in Illinois. And I do that through another organization that I am also on the board of, and it's called NAMI. NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I am also NAMI Illinois' legislative liaison. I am on 2 more legislative committees in Illinois. One is called Healthy Minds, Healthy Lives, and that's through Thresholds, a major mental health agency in Illinois. And I'm on the Mental Health Summit for Illinois, which started as a University of Chicago legislative group. And now people from all over the state in many walks of life that are in any way affiliated with mental illness are part of this. And we work to change mental health laws within the state to make them more favorable in assisting individuals that are struggling, as well as their families, to have access to them. You said that you went into police departments. I also have gone into police departments and schools. In police departments, I have assisted with training police officers in CIT training.
Yes.
You probably know what that is.
We did a whole episode on it.
So I have helped with a training and accessing the companies that do the training for police departments so that they are more appropriate when entering the home of somebody that is in the midst of a mental health crisis, to calmly and effectively get them into the level of care that they require safely. So I also work with estate planning attorneys so that families can assist their loved ones by protecting assets so that they have the money to use. Because when you're mentally ill, it's very unlikely that you will have the wherewithal to appropriately use an inheritance. So we set up special needs trust with the trustee so that that money is always there for their benefit. And I do communication coaching and support with the families that hire me so that I can always be available to help them communicate effectively with their mentally ill loved one.
I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So, if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show.
You earlier mentioned schizophrenia. An easy way to describe schizophrenia is saying it's a thought disorder.
Okay, interesting.
And what you said is they're not in touch with reality is one aspect of schizophrenia, but grandiosity, paranoia, these are also aspects of schizophrenia. They also can have command hallucinations that tell them to kill themselves. They can have visual and auditory hallucinations, like you described your grandmother had. It was a hallucination that she imagined that she saw her cousin there. It's a lot larger than what you anticipated or what you explained, but you were very close. You definitely touched on one aspect of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia and bipolar are the two major mental health disorders that I work with. Many times they are triggered by substance use. Marijuana is right now the most dangerous substance, and it's very dangerous because it's legal. And legal means you find a dispensary on every corner. It also means that the potency of the THC in the marijuana can be up to 95% that you can go and purchase on your own, even if you have a pre-existing mental health condition. So between 18 and 25 is when we most likely see the onset of these serious mental illnesses, frequently caused by the usage of recreational marijuana. Also, there are genetic components, and certain populations are more predisposed. If you have a genetic history, if you're an Ashkenazi Jewish person, there are a lot of things that can make somebody more susceptible to a serious mental illness, and marijuana is one of them.
Very interesting. And I just thought we were nervous as Jewish people. That was, but I see what you mean, and I didn't mean to make light of that. Thank you for
of course not.
Expanding my knowledge of schizophrenia. My knowledge is based upon my interactions when I was a child, and I'm sure I didn't get the whole story. So I appreciate you educating everyone on the other aspects that I'm not aware of. And that's why I bring experts onto the show. I don't pretend to know everything. That's why I have an accountant to do my taxes, because I don't know tax law either. And just listening to you, it appears to me that not all heroes wear capes or badges. This is a behind the scenes, really heroic for these families that are going through not knowing how to handle someone with mental illness. I did not know you were involved in NAMI. I'm thrilled that you are involved in NAMI. I did a Zoom session with the Lake County chapter maybe a year and a half ago, and then I spoke at the last NAMI state conference on how to manage out-of-control behaviors and how to de-escalate. So very interesting, great little connection there. I think it's fantastic. Some of your background includes being a mediator and certified in domestic violence counseling. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so throughout my career, I have always continued my education. My first master's degree was in special education. My second was in developmental psychology. My third was in counseling psychology. And I am certified in domestic violence counseling as well as mediation. I was, while working at a youth agency, I became certified in mediation and was a Cook County juvenile court mediator for a number of years, helping adolescents avoid the criminal justice system in court by mediating with the victim. And it was really eye-opening that we could turn these kids around by having the victim be gentle and generous and allowing them to negotiate some sort of way to pay them back that didn't involve getting the courts involved. So I was very, very blessed to be able to do that, but I feel I'm blessed in all these things. I've also run and do currently run a number of support groups, and the support group that I currently run is for parents or family members of adults with serious mental illness. I run that through No Shame on You. I've been doing it since COVID, so for 5 years, and it's for free. And I do it twice a month. It's open and it's free and everyone is welcome. And it's family members working together to help one another, support one another through love. And it's a very rewarding thing. I worked in domestic violence at an agency in Waukegan, Illinois called La Casa. Mm-hmm. And it's a domestic violence agency. And so I had to be certified in order to counsel victims of domestic violence. And I've spent a lot of my career giving back to that community because it's just so important, and it takes on average a woman 7 times of being victimized, 7 calls to the police before she finally leaves. And so I supported these women and men who were victims of domestic violence and made sure that they had a safe place to go and a safety plan to use to get there. Terrific. Many times they traveled with children.
I can see that, and I've seen that from the law enforcement perspective. I'm thrilled there are people like you out there that really are helping people. And part of the conversation has sparked some questions in my head that are a little bit off script, so I'm going to go there.
Go for it.
You had talked about discharge planning and having people be on their way to recovery. Are mental illness is chronic, and is there a recovery, or are we talking treatment for the entire life?
That's a wonderful question, and it's not a black and white answer.
I figured not.
So people can recover from episodic psychotic episodes. So if it's caused by marijuana and it was marijuana psychosis, when the marijuana is out of their system, and if we get them into substance use disorder treatment and they are able to participate in a 12-step program and use a sponsor and stay clean, then they could never have another serious psychotic event again. That being said, many mental health issues are chronic, and you will have to be mindful of your symptoms. So I believe that meaningful recovery is a 3-pronged approach. The first is insight. Insight means you understand what your disorder is, you can explain it, and you own it. You know what triggers you, you know what your symptoms are, and you're comfortable enough in accepting it that you can talk effectively with providers. The second part is advocacy. When your symptoms are exacerbated or they become more prevalent, do you have a plan? Can you advocate for yourself? Can you call your therapist or psychiatrist, a hotline, a warm line? Can you advocate to get yourself the help you need without making a reckless choice like using drugs?
Very good.
And the third part is structure. Can you work, go to school, or volunteer at least 20 hours a week? If you can do those three things, identify and own your diagnosis and have insight, advocate on your own behalf for support, and put structure of at least 20 hours a week in your life, you can have meaningful recovery. Recovery does not mean a cure. It means you can live the life you've desired, that you're entitled to, and you can function in our society.
So that brings up another question. We talked about temporary, maybe that's not the right word, acute versus chronic. What about grief? Can grief result in mental illness, at least in a temporary depression type thing? Or what's your take on grief? Loss of a loved one is what I'm talking about.
Well, we know that there are 7 stages of grief.
Right.
Grief usually manifests as depression or anxiety with loss of interest in doing things you previously enjoyed, interrupted sleep patterns, meaning either you sleep too much or you don't sleep at all, change in appetite, and lack of interest of doing the things you liked and being with people you enjoyed previously. There are great grief counselors out there and grief support groups that can assist people with grief. I ran a grief support group during COVID, and I'm going to tell you about it because it's one of my shining moments because it was so different. I was asked by the Center on Halsted, which is a mental health organization for the gay and lesbian population. They asked me, and these were for individuals who had lost their partners. But there were only 4 or 5 people that were signed up for this group. And it was actually asked of No Shame on You. And they gave it over to me because I'm a psychologist and have experience working with grief. And I, of course, said, yes, I do it. But when I talked to the Center on Halsted, I said, look, I'm dealing with a bunch of adults who are also grieving the loss of the child they thought they'd have because their child developed a serious mental illness. And I was looking to start a support group for them. I said, what would you think of me combining these 2 populations? It was kind of out of the box. And they said, do you think it'll work? And I went, I really do. I said, I think compassion and support are compassion and support. Right. And why shouldn't we all work together to help each other? So they gave me the green light and I did it. And it was the best support group I've ever had. These gay men who had lost their partner, and it was all Jewish moms who were mourning the loss of the child they expected to have, the child that would go to college and become a doctor, a lawyer, accountant. They started working together, and we did this group for a year, and everybody grew. And everybody learned, and the compassion that I saw blooming in this Zoom room was amazing. Keep in mind, this was COVID. Everybody was dealing with something. And so we did this on Zoom, and it was amazing. Grief was the general umbrella topic, but it also became support, compassion, and love. And at the end of the year, when our group was coming to an end and Center on Halsted was opening up for in-person support, everybody felt so much stronger for the knowledge, education, and opportunity they had for participating in this group. And some of these people are in my support group to this day because they got so much out of it.
That's terrific. It's wonderful. When we talked about domestic violence, I'm not sure if you're familiar or you worked with this, but there is a small but gaining momentum movement in law enforcement to have a social worker respond to cases of domestic violence in addition to the police. Are you involved in any of those types of programs?
I do not do it, but I am familiar. I work closely with a lot of police departments because most of the time when the clients call me, I'm the second call after they call 911.
Okay, got it. So it's connected.
Because I deal very closely with police social work departments. I also advise all of my clients if they think things are coming to a head and they may need to call 911. I have them call their local police department social worker first, so that police that comes to a house with a mental illness knows what they're coming for, and they can use no lights, no sirens.
Right.
And if possible, plainclothes attired police officers, and of course, a social worker. So, yes, I do work with that. And in domestic violence, I think a social worker is beneficial. It depends on the level of aggression and agitation, and if the social worker will be safe.
Right.
Because we don't want the police to be focused on keeping the social worker safe when they may have a family to keep safe.
When we return, we will be continuing the conversation with Bonnie Lane from No Shame on You. Stay tuned.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.